Now let me tell you something about the Amish that nobody in a city apartment is going to tell you. While the rest of the world was busy figuring out how to make everything run on electricity and then panicking every time the power went out, the Amish were quietly growing food through every winter without a single extension cord. No gas bill, no electric heater humming in the corner, no thermostat to argue with. Just knowledge, ingenuity, and a deep understanding of how the Lord designed the natural world to work. And it works. That is the part that should humble every engineer with a fancy degree who ever looked at an Amish farm and felt superior. The crops grow. The greenhouse stays warm. The family eats through February while everyone else is paying utility bills that would make your eyes water. They told us that modern heating systems were progress, that you needed technology to grow food in winter, that the old ways were primitive and inefficient, and we should be grateful to have moved past them. Well, the Amish never got that memo, and their greenhouses are warmer than the confidence of the people who wrote it. What I'm going to share with you today is not theory. These are methods that have been tested across generations by people who could not afford to get it wrong. People for whom a failed crop was not an inconvenience but a genuine crisis. They got it right because they had to, and what they figured out is elegant in its simplicity and profound in its effectiveness. Let us go through it properly. The first method. Let the sun do what the sun was made to do. Now this sounds obvious. Use the sun to heat the greenhouse. Of course, but the difference between how most people think about sunlight and how the Amish actually use it is the difference between knowing rain exists and knowing how to collect every drop of it. The Amish do not just put a greenhouse somewhere convenient and hope the sun finds it. They orient the structure deliberately, purposefully, the way you would position a chair to catch the best light for reading. The long side of the greenhouse faces south, always south, because the sun travels across the southern sky in winter, and a south-facing wall of glass or clear plastic will catch that low winter sun all day long, from the moment it clears the horizon until it sets. This is called passive solar design. Passive just means the sun does the work without any mechanical assistance. No pumps, no fans, no moving parts. Just glass angled correctly, positioned correctly, doing what glass does when the sun shines through it. Now here is the part most people miss. The sun does not just warm the air inside the greenhouse. It warms everything the light touches. The soil, the pots, the pathways, the walls. And those things hold on to that warmth after the sun goes down. The structure becomes a heat-storing vessel throughout the day, and it slowly releases that stored warmth through the night. I have seen this principle at work my whole life, though not always in a greenhouse. My grandmother's farmhouse had thick stone walls, and on a winter afternoon when the sun had been on them all day, you could press your palm flat against that stone and feel the warmth coming off it hours after sunset. She did not have a word for it. She just knew that stone held heat and that you built accordingly. The Amish know the same thing. The roof of a well-designed Amish greenhouse is angled, not flat, not vertical, but sloped at the angle that best catches the low winter sun. Some have double-layered walls with an air gap in between which insulates like a thermos. Some use a north wall made of something solid and insulating because nothing useful comes from the north in winter, only cold. The south wall is all glass. The north wall keeps the cold out. Simple, logical, effective. Position your greenhouse facing south. Angle the roof to catch winter sun. Make your north wall as solid and insulating as you can manage. That is the foundation of everything else. The second method, thermal mass. Teaching your greenhouse to hold heat like a promise. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting, and I want to explain this carefully, because once you understand it, you will never look at a pile of stones or a barrel of water the same way again. Thermal mass is the ability of a material to absorb heat and release it slowly over time. That is the scientific definition. In plain language, some things soak up warmth during the day and give it back at night, the way a good wool blanket holds the heat of your body long after you have pulled it around you. Water is one of the best thermal mass materials that exists. It can absorb an enormous amount of heat without getting too hot too fast, and it releases that heat slowly and steadily as temperatures drop. The Amish have known this practically forever. You will find large, dark barrels of water lining the interior walls of Amish greenhouses, not for irrigation, not for any other purpose, but specifically for heat storage. During the day, the sun warms those barrels. At night, those barrels warm the greenhouse. A 55-gallon barrel of water can hold enough heat to make a meaningful difference in temperature through a cold night. Line a wall with several of them and you have built yourself a passive heating system that costs nothing to run. Stone works the same way. Dark stone, dark brick, dark clay pavers on the floor, anything dark and dense that the sun can reach during the day. Dark colours absorb more solar radiation than light colours. That is why a black car on a summer day is almost untouchable and a white one stays comparatively cool. The Amish use dark materials inside the greenhouse deliberately. Dark pathways, dark walls, dark containers, because those surfaces are working all day, collecting the warmth that will be released all night. There is something deeply satisfying to me about this principle. The idea that what you invest during the warm hours comes back to you during the cold ones. That preparation and patience are rewarded. That the material world operates on a kind of honest reciprocity, give heat, receive heat back. The Lord built that principle into the physics of matter itself, and the Amish simply learned to cooperate with it. If you are building or improving a greenhouse, add thermal mass wherever you can. Water barrels against the north wall, stone or brick floors where the sun hits longest, dark clay pots for your plants instead of light plastic ones. None of it costs much. All of it works. The third method, composting for heat. Yes, you read that correctly. Now I want to tell you about something that sounds almost too simple to be real, and I understand the skepticism, but stay with me. When organic material decomposes, when leaves and kitchen scraps and manure and straw break down into compost, that process generates heat. Real, measurable, significant heat. A properly managed compost pile can reach internal temperatures of 140, 150, even 160 degrees Fahrenheit at its centre. That is not warm, that is hot. The Amish figured out a long time ago that this heat does not have to go to waste. There is an old method called a hotbed, and it works like this. You dig a trench, roughly a foot to 18 inches deep, inside or along the edge of the greenhouse. You fill the bottom of that trench with fresh manure. Horse manure is particularly good because horses do not fully digest their feed and the remaining organic material is rich and active. You cover the manure with soil. As the manure decomposes beneath the surface, it generates heat that rises up through the soil into the root zone of whatever you plant above it. This is not a small effect. A properly constructed hotbed will keep soil temperatures consistently warmer than the surrounding air for weeks. In a cold climate, that difference is the difference between seeds germinating and seeds sitting dormant until spring. It is a heating system buried in the ground, powered entirely by biology, that improves the soil as it works and costs you nothing but the labour of building it. The Amish also place compost bins and active compost piles along the interior perimeter of the greenhouse. The heat radiating from an active pile warms the air around it. Multiple piles along multiple walls add up to a measurable warming effect throughout the structure. And when the composting is finished, you have rich, dark soil amendment ready to go into your garden beds. Nothing is wasted. Everything serves double or triple duty. I want to say something about this that goes beyond the practical. The Amish understanding of composting is rooted in a worldview that I share deeply. The conviction that nothing is truly waste, that decay is not failure but transformation, that what seems to be ending is often simply changing form into something that will feed new life. That is not just philosophy. It is biology, and it is theology. The Lord built resurrection into the very chemistry of organic matter. The fourth method, windbreaks and insulation. Keeping the cold out is half the battle. There is a thing that people do not always consider when they think about heating a space. They think entirely about adding heat from the inside, but keeping cold from getting in is equally important and often more cost-effective because cold air infiltrating a greenhouse undoes heat faster than almost anything. The Amish address this from the outside in. They plant windbreaks, rows of trees, dense hedges, shrubs, on the north and northwest sides of their greenhouses, because that is the direction from which winter wind typically comes in most regions of North America. A good windbreak of established trees can reduce wind speed by half or more. And wind is one of the primary mechanisms by which a greenhouse loses heat. Cold moving air pulls warmth out of a structure the way a draft pulls warmth out of a room. Stop the wind and you dramatically reduce heat loss. These windbreaks take time to grow, which is why the Amish plant them years before they are needed. They think generationally. They plant trees whose full benefit will be felt by their children and grandchildren. That orientation toward the future, that willingness to do work whose reward comes slowly, that is something the modern world has largely lost, and I think we are paying for that loss in ways that extend well beyond cold greenhouses. For insulation closer to the structure itself, the Amish use straw bales. They stack them around the base and along the exterior walls of the greenhouse, especially on the north and east sides. Straw is one of the finest natural insulators available. The air pockets trapped within the straw resist heat transfer the way a down jacket resists cold, not by generating warmth, but by preventing its escape. A row of straw bales packed tightly against the base of a greenhouse wall will keep the cold ground from wicking heat out of the structure and buffer the lower walls against the worst of winter wind. Inside the greenhouse, the Amish use layering. Clear plastic sheeting stretched inside the glass or primary covering creates a dead air space, a thermal buffer that dramatically reduces heat loss through the walls and roof. It is the same principle as double-paned windows. The air trapped between two layers of material is a poor conductor of heat, which means it slows the movement of warmth from inside to outside. Simple, cheap, effective. My grandmother used to hang heavy quilts over the inside of windows on bitter winter nights to keep the cold from seeping through the glass. Same principle, different scale. The knowledge was always there. The Amish simply applied it systematically to a larger problem. The fifth method, cold frames and hotbeds together. The Amish double play. Now we have talked about hotbeds already, but I want to talk about cold frames separately because they are a different tool that serves a different purpose, and the two together create something greater than either one alone. A cold frame is exactly what it sounds like. A frame, typically wooden, with a transparent cover of glass or clear plastic placed over plants or a planting area. It is a miniature greenhouse within the greenhouse. It captures solar radiation during the day, traps the warmed air around the plants inside, and provides a layer of protection from cold air and wind at night. The temperature inside a cold frame on a sunny winter day will be significantly warmer than the temperature outside the frame, even if both are inside a greenhouse. The Amish use cold frames for their most vulnerable seedlings, their earliest plantings, their most tender crops. Stack a cold frame over a hotbed, and you have created a remarkably effective growing environment. Warmth from below through biological decomposition, warmth from above through solar collection, protection all around from the frame itself. These structures require no electricity, no gas, no ongoing cost beyond the initial materials. An old window laid over a wooden box is functionally a cold frame. It is not complicated. The Amish did not design it to be complicated. They designed it to work, and it does. The sixth method, choosing the right crops, letting the plants do part of the work. I want to say something that seems obvious but apparently is not, because I have watched people fight their growing conditions instead of working with them, and then wonder why they are struggling. The Amish choose crops that are suited to cold conditions. They do not try to grow peppers and tomatoes through a Pennsylvania winter without significant supplemental heat. They grow what thrives in cold: spinach, kale, carrots, beets, certain lettuces, hardy herbs. These plants do not merely survive light frost. Some of them improve with it. Kale, for instance, gets sweeter after a frost. The plant converts its starches to sugars as a biological cold protection mechanism. That is the scientific explanation, which in grandma terms means the cold makes the kale taste better. The Lord built a reward into the endurance. The plants that persist through hardship become more nourishing, more flavourful. I find that principle holds beyond the garden. The Amish also practice succession planting, staggering their planting dates so that crops are maturing at different times, ensuring a continuous harvest rather than everything coming in at once and then nothing. This requires planning. It requires thinking 3 and 4 months ahead. But the result is that even in the depths of winter, something is always ready to harvest, always productive, always feeding the family. Choosing the right crops is not giving up on what you want. It is the wisdom of working with what is available rather than fighting against what is not. The Amish understand that the growing season is not an obstacle to be overcome with enough technology. It is a rhythm to be learned and respected and worked with intelligently. The 7th method, the philosophy underneath all of it: simplicity, sustainability, and thinking in generations. Now, I want to close this out with something that goes deeper than any individual technique, because the individual techniques are really just expressions of something larger. The Amish approach to greenhouse heating without electricity is not a collection of clever workarounds. It is the expression of an entire worldview. A worldview that says the natural world was designed with intelligence and generosity, that it provides what is needed for those who learn its rhythms, and that the proper human response is not to dominate nature with machinery, but to cooperate with it through understanding. They plant windbreaks, knowing their grandchildren will benefit most from them. They build with stone and wood, knowing those materials will outlast anything made of plastic and wire. They choose composting over chemical heating, knowing that the end result improves the soil that feeds the next generation. They think in decades. They think in lifetimes. They think in the kind of long arc that our fast-moving, disposable, upgrade-every-year culture has almost entirely lost. And here is what I know from more years of living than most people get: that long arc thinking is not just good for greenhouses. It is good for bodies. It is good for families. It is good for souls. The same patience that waits for a compost pile to generate heat, that plants a tree for a grandchild's benefit, that builds a stone floor knowing it will warm the room for 50 winters. That patience applied to how you eat, how you rest, how you tend your relationships, how you tend your spirit. That patience is what a long and fruitful life is built on. They told us speed and convenience and technology were progress. The Amish looked at all of that and quietly kept doing what worked. Their greenhouses grow food through January without a single utility bill. Their farms are still feeding families after generations. Their methods are being rediscovered now by people paying consultants to teach them what the Amish never forgot. You do not need everything they are selling you. You need knowledge, patience, good materials, and the willingness to work with the world the Lord made rather than against it. That is the whole lesson from the greenhouse and from everything else. Now, I have got seedlings to check on, and they will not check on themselves.